All right, Andy, speaking of, I mentioned Raw. You mentioned it 2 hours for the first time since 2012. Man, they crammed a whole lot into 2 hours. What are your initial thoughts coming off of this Monday Night Raw?
I hated it more than I thought I would.
Okay.
Honestly. Like it just didn't feel like they knew what they were doing with like commercial breaks and matches and everything else. It felt
Sure.
very rushed and very bland. Because like the IC title match, man, like it was only like 6 minutes of actual TV time. Everything else was
Yep.
commercial break, and it never really got to the point where it was exciting for me, at least.
Yeah.
It was very rushed. It seemed very all over the place at times.
Yeah.
You could tell that they're used to 3 hours, and so cramming
Yes.
everything into two was very tricky. And I think it's going to take a couple weeks to get used to it. Luckily, I think next week's episode is taped, so
Really?
they're able
Why
to
this?
kind of fit that in
Do you know why they're doing that?
because of the UK tour.
Mm.
So
So they're taping it
they're doing
tonight?
2 episodes tonight. Yeah, that's why.
Oh,
Spoiler alert! That's why Cody was there tonight because he's going to be there next week as well.
okay. That makes sense then.
So
Okay. Interesting. I wondered why Cody showed up, but that makes a lot of sense then. Okay, let's talk about it. Main event, Gunther successfully defending the World Heavyweight Championship against Sami Zayn, as I'm sure we both anticipated. Obviously, there was a slim chance that Sami Zayn was going to win, but he did not. You texted me something very, very interesting before about the possibility of Sami winning, and they teased it with Cody Rhodes. You mentioned it, having Sami and Cody go at it at Crown Jewel, of course, having KO in the middle of that. I like that idea, but I also think that we could be headed to Cody being on the Bloodline team in War Games. So you might not want them to go against each other. But all that being said, regardless of the reason, we saw Cody face to face with Gunther to build towards their Crown Jewel match. Obviously, Gunther and Sami delivered on a fine main event.
yeah, it was really good. They did the normal start off kind of slow and build as the match kind of continued towards the end.
Yep.
It was not on my bingo card of Sammy kicking out at 1 after eating 2 power bombs.
Yeah. Right.
Um,
Oh,
that blew my mind, but I really I popped for it. I really enjoyed that. And yeah, the thing I sent you earlier, I saw it on social media. I would give credit to who had it, but I completely forgot the name of it.
yes.
Um, but I was curious by the idea, but I like Gunther Cody more because they've teased it since the Rumble 2 years ago.
Yep.
When Gunther came out 1 and Cody was 30. So I just kind of full circle bringing that back. Both guys are world champs now.
Yep.
But one of them could lose and it's not going to feel like a big deal.
Yep.
So I mean, it's a big deal, but it's not going to like harm them or hurt their championship in any way. Plus you never know who could get involved. That could be where the bloodline get involved and cost Cody. That could be where a certain Oldberg could get involved and do something to Gunther. So you never really know what could happen. I really hope we're not heading that direction, but it kind of seems like we are at some point down the line.
Yeah, I mean, I think you could definitely have Goldberg come in and spear Gunther at the same time as somebody attacking Cody. So yeah, it could be very interesting either way. But if we're fantasy booking it, I mean, you just went down that rabbit hole. So let's talk about it. You just said a loss wouldn't really hurt either of them. We're going to talk a lot about this over the next couple of weeks because again, we saw Cody tonight. We're probably going to see Cody next week, like you said. So if you have to make an early prediction, I mean, a loss doesn't hurt either. I can see a scenario where either of them win that Crown Jewel championship as the champion of all champions, as Triple H like to put it. If you have to have an early prediction, who are you going with?
If I have to do an early prediction right now, I would probably say Gunther wins it. Because I think they want to do a lot to make that world title feel as important and as equal. And I feel like you can get more out of the story if the bloodline or even if The Rock himself cost Cody that match. That could kind of build to something down the line as well. And so, and it's a big win for Gunther beating Cody. I'm not saying that Sammy's not a big win, it is, but you need to start, that was kind of the problem with Priest is he wasn't really racking up like massive wins against big time names other than Seth.
Sure.
And so, just if you have Gunther beat Cody, that can really push him into the stratosphere. So right now, if I had to pick, I would pick Gunther, but my mind will probably change like multiple times between now and Crown Jewel.
Yeah, if you're making this the champion of all champions, would you not want the face of your company to be the champion of all champions? Like, wouldn't you want Cody having that title? Also, on the flip side of that, we talk about scenarios all the time where Cody can lose matches and not be affected or not lose the title. This is 100% one of those situations where Cody can lose. People are behind Gunther. They understand Gunther beating Cody. So I get that. I can see both sides. I'm like you.
Yeah.
I probably go back and forth.
Yeah, and the champion of all champions though seems like a very Gunther title to like run around with for a while.
Yep.
So I could absolutely see that being the scenario of, if Cody wins that, I feel like it's there for like a week and then kind of goes away a little bit until until the next Crown Jewel when it comes back around. But I feel like with Gunther, he could, he's all about prestige and bringing honor back to pro wrestling and everything else. What else? I mean, how else can you do that by being the champion of champions? So I think it kind of fits his mold a little bit more.
Yeah, I completely agree with that too. We did not mention Goldberg just for the sake of Levi Bachelor. I did not mention Goldberg just for the sake of Andy getting upset. We didn't really talk about it at Bad Blood, but Goldberg was there as one of the Hall of Famers surrounding the ring, trying to make the event feel big. Plus, he's from Atlanta. So he and Gunther had a little bit of an interaction. Goldberg said, "You're next, boy." I think there could be a scenario where we see Gunther versus Goldberg. Gunther's got 3 minutes for him, so it's fine. So I think we could see that match if we want to see it or not. I think it's probably good money. So where do you think that happens? If we're not, obviously we're not going to book it at Crown Jewel. Survivor Series is probably Gunther and Punk. Do you try to save that for the Royal Rumble to put more people in a stadium? Like, what do you, or Saturday night's main event? And that's a good way to get Goldberg on national TV.
Yeah, though that was the two, because I think we're gonna have a really big match at Saturday night's main event. I even thought possibly like Roman Cody 3 on Saturday night's main event would be wild if they did that. I think would fit there, but it also feels like a very Rumble match. Like world title match, because they normally like that's where, and no offense to Kevin Owens, because I think he is a threat to win the world title, but that's like where you see Kevin Owens and Finn Balor, guys that like almost get their opportunity, but they never do, because you're heading into WrestleMania season and you don't really want to switch it up a lot.
When we saw last year the Fatal 4-Way for Roman's title, it was Randy, AJ Styles, and LA Knight. Good way to put them all in the thing, but they're really not going to, be in the title picture.
Right. And it's a good way to free up the Rumble for some other people and just kind of get rid of that. There's a part of me that believes that they might try to stretch this all the way to Mania.
Oh, really? Okay.
And do Gunther Goldberg at Mania. If a certain old man was still in charge, then I'd be very worried about the Rumble and who would win the Rumble. But I feel like they could stretch it to WrestleMania, but I doubt they do. I feel like they're just going to do it to the Rumble if they do anything. And I feel more confident about Triple H being in charge than I do before about Goldberg. Because now I feel like it's Goldberg coming in to not just lose, but like put over Gunther as like the next, this massive, really big person coming in with as the world champion and being dominant down the line.
I like the idea of the Rumble. Obviously, I'm intrigued by Saturday night's main events as I just came up with that as I'm speaking in real time. So I like that idea too, for sure. But I think the Rumble is good because also we're looking at the amount of matches on a pay-per-view. And normally we're at 5, a big pay-per-view, we might be at 6. This is an easy way to get a 7th or an 8th real quick match.
Quick one. Yeah.
To be able to have Gunther on the card, because otherwise he might be defending the title against somebody else. He might not even be on the card. So it's an easy way to get Gunther on the card, easy way to get a legend. It's a stadium. Got to put butts in the seats, especially if Rock is or is not advertised for the Rumble. So this is a legend you can advertise. So I think that's the way to go.
Yeah, and I mean, I could, how cool would it be to see backstage at some point Goldberg and Rock kind of go face to face?
Yeah.
Like that's
Yeah.
like a good full circle moment. Honestly, I'm kind of surprised that's not happening at Crown Jewel.
Okay.
Like
Yeah.
I could see that as a possibility down the line.
And we
Um,
got more Saudi shows in 2025. It's fine.
yeah, so I could see that happening down the line, but I think it's a good because Triple H is all about calling back to the past in a respectful way and not like you know, pushing it down everybody's throat kind of way. And so I could absolutely see something like that happening.
I tell you what just came to mind, and I know you just joked about Goldberg winning the Rumble, and I'm not saying he would win it, but it
Be
would
in
be
it.
cool. It would be cool if he was
Yeah.
in it and he speared Rock just like he did on his
Yeah.
debut in
Rock
the
standing by
Rumble.
himself in the
Yes,
ring.
that'd be sick. That would be sick, man.
I would be cool with that.
Place would pop for that.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, that would be great. All right, let's talk about the other championship that was on the line. A big card for Raw tonight, cramming it into 2 hours. They were very adventurous, very I don't know what the word is. Had some high expectations for getting all this stuff into 2 hours and buddy. But anyway, Intercontinental Championship match. Jey Uso defeats Xavier Woods. Match was what it was. We saw Woods get frustrated as Woods has been doing recently. That's not the big story of the match. The big story of the match is that Bron Breakker is not the babyface that we thought he was last week. He comes in and he spears the mess out of Jey Uso, raises that Intercontinental Championship. He is coming back for his gold, man. I'm shocked, honestly. I thought they'd keep him as a babyface.
Yeah, I wasn't really sure if they were going to keep him as a babyface or keep him as a heel or a tweener or whatever the case is. Because you don't have, I'm trying to think of Raw. You don't have a lot of outside of Gunther and probably Bronson Reed. You don't have a lot of massive like heels.
Mm-hmm.
You got Judgment Day, but they weren't even on the show tonight. You've got a couple other people, but not to the level like Bron Breakker, threat to anybody. But I really enjoyed the segment. Honestly, the way they shot it when Jay was on the top rope, I thought Xavier was back in the ring and was going to attack Jey Uso. And then all of a sudden, when he got speared, I was like, oh no, Braun's just back to being Braun. He's just a heel again. What do you think the chances are that Jay just drops it right back to him?
Very good.
Yeah.
I hate that because they may have just said, okay, let's just give him the championship just for the sake of giving him the championship, give him the moment, and then it gets dropped right back at Crown Jewel. I think that's very possible.
Yeah, I could see that happening too, unfortunately. Although the way that it kind of started off, like the night started off, I could see Jay dropping it to Seth at some point too.
I could too. I thought about that for a second too, because we saw Seth come out and he spoke, and then they did a really cool thing where Punk was out first. We'll talk about that in a minute. Punk was out first, and then Seth's music hit, and then Seth got a promo, and then Jay's music hit. So it was sort of a way to interweave all of these things, but to progress the show.
Yeah, I really enjoyed that too. And I think with Triple H and this new regime, you don't know what's by accident, what's by choice, what's going to happen next week, and what's going to happen next year. Like you don't really know what seeds are being planted for when. So it's really fun to kind of look back and speculate on some of the stuff that we're seeing.
It's like Sam Roberts says. He says everything counts, so we may as well just live by that mantra that everything counts.
Yeah, I agree.
All right. Speaking of everything counting, we mentioned I'm trying to figure out where I'm going here. I've got notes all over the place. We mentioned Seth Rollins and CM Punk. Let's talk about Seth Rollins for a second. Let's try to separate the two because I got a feeling that down the road we're going to be talking about these two. That they were staring off for a reason. I just said it. Everything counts, right?
Absolutely.
So they're staring off for a reason. Seth Rollins, first words back after his surprise return last week on Monday Night Raw, after he stomped Bronson Reed into the steps, allowing Braun Strowman to pick up the win in the last Monster Standing. Let's talk Seth Rollins for a second before we talk last Monster Standing, because we didn't get a chance to talk about that last week. So Seth Rollins comes out. He issues the challenge to Big Bronson Reed. Anytime, anywhere, this time he's going to be ready for him. I'm just going to say this, ma'am. We need Seth Rollins. He was the MVP of WrestleMania. I don't think we need to have him regress any at all. I'm not going to be a fan if he loses to Bronson Reed at all.
Yeah, I don't know what to think about it. Like, I thought, because we kind of talked about it last week or 2 weeks ago as well, that Bronson was going to win the last Monster Standing match. Like, that was going to be his big, hurrah moment. I'm surprised neither one of us called Seth returning and and costing him, because that was not on my mind at all.
Well, I didn't even notice this. Well, when I went back and watched it, obviously I did, but they gave it away in the interview with Bronson Reed. Like, we hadn't heard Seth Rollins' name in like 3 months. And Jackie Redmond interviews Bronson Reed. She goes, so Seth Rollins will return eventually. Is that in the back of your mind? I'm like, why do you give it away? Don't do that.
Yeah, I was shocked that he returned, and I really enjoyed how they did it. I don't know. It's kind of a lose-lose situation in some ways, because I feel like if Bronson doesn't win, then he's kind of back to where he was.
Sure.
But if Seth's been gone for a while, he hasn't won since before WrestleMania.
Yep.
So it's been a minute. Although it depends on the story they're telling. I do like the story of a deranged, like, going crazy Seth Rollins heading into the Punk feud.
Sure.
Like, just becoming bitter and angry, kind of like a copy paste of with Drew, but I feel like with Seth it'll be kind of the same premise, just done very differently.
Yep.
Because while there is public disdain between Punk and Drew, it's not nearly to the level that it is for Seth and Punk. So you're going to go in crazy directions. But I kind of agree. If Seth loses this, it kind of puts him down a little, but it may be for storyline reasons, which I'm eventually going to be okay with, but in the moment, probably not.
Yeah, I'm not going to be okay with it. There's no, I understand trying to put Bronson over, and I understand trying to make him, you always want to make bigger stars. Obviously Seth has has less time in front of him than he does behind him. So I get that, but he was the MVP of WrestleMania. You just said he hasn't won since before WrestleMania, and he was World Heavyweight Champion at that point. So if you're going to build him to this CM Punk feud, yes, if you're going the deranged psychopath route, it's okay for him to lose some matches, but he also has to stay credible and he has to stay believable. And fans have some weird opinions about Seth Rollins. He's one of those polarizing guys, man, that I just don't understand why people, there's a contingency of people that love him and hate him. And you got to get everybody to at least rally around the fact that he's a main event player. So as much as Bronson Reed needs to be built up, I can't see Seth Rollins losing in this feud. I just can't.
Yeah, I don't think he'll lose the feud. He might lose a match in the feud, though, because I don't think it's just a one-off match. I think we're gonna get probably something different. Maybe like the Raw match, Bronson beats him by nefarious means or whatever, and then the second match is in a steel cage or something like that.
Sure.
But yeah, I could see him lose, like dropping a single match to Bronson, but I don't think he'll lose more than that. Hopefully not, at least. But yeah, I get what you're saying, because fans are he's one of those guys. He's honestly, him and Punk are very similar in that way. Of the people who love him. The people who hate him cannot stand him.
Yep.
And so, it plays into that really well. Of most people who are probably CM Punk fans are not Seth Rollins fans, and most people who are Seth Rollins fans aren't CM Punk fans. I'm probably the only hybrid that loves both of them to death. But they on that same kind of trajectory. But you're absolutely right. They have to make him feel, they have to keep him credible and have to keep him, feeling as important as your Punks, your Drews, your Gunthers, all these other people. And so maybe that's about putting the IC title on him for a while and kind of letting him hold that for a minute.
And I think that's totally fine. I don't see any issues with that because we saw Gunther's incredible reign and how that brought him to popularity. So I think you can do the same thing with Seth Rollins. All right, that's going to wrap up what we're talking about with Monday Night Raw here. For more on Monday Night Raw, again, we realize there's so much more that happened on Monday Night Raw. Sheamus and Pete Dunne. We saw some Wyatt Six stuff. We there's what's next for Liv and Judgment Day and Dom and Raquel and all that. We'll talk about stuff like that on Friday. We have a YouTube exclusive show. It's called 3 Count on Friday. We'll get you caught up on everything we miss on the regular podcast. So that is our rapid fire show. We'll give some quick thoughts and reactions there. So make sure you subscribe to the YouTube channel if you haven't already.